Hey. So, I haven't made one of these types of videos in quite a while, but I figured might as well do one because I wanted to react to Billy's two of his more recent videos as of today. Because I think the topics I had some personal experiences or whatever anecdotes to relate to or whatever. So I figured, what the hell, just do this kind of webcam PC recording video thing type of thing. So I have some notes that I made, so I will be going by those. Um, and first, I guess I was going to, well, first, the first video that I primarily am reacting to is coming out of depression, and the second is constant conversation that goes nowhere. But the first one primarily is coming out of depression, that video, and I was going to show the I don't know, just the chat GPT when I looked up, like what did I ask exactly? What is depression? Yeah, just that. Depression is a clinical mood disorder characterized by just to get an idea, a baseline of what the quote unquote probably medical or clinical term is for depression, just so there's less assumptions or whatever based on whatever, like, so there's a more clear definition of what is being actually talked about here, kind of, to some extent. But yeah, depression, as said by ChatGPT here, depression is a clinical mood disorder characterized by persistent, abnormal lowering of mood, that's the end, lowering of mood that interferes with daily function. It is not the same as normal sadness. Core features include persistent low mood or emptiness, loss of interest or pleasure in usual activities, changes in sleep, insomnia or oversleeping, changes in appetite or weight, low energy or fatigue, difficulty concentrating, feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt, recurring thoughts of death or suicide in severe cases. It involves both biological factors, blah, 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 genetic, blah, 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 and psychological factors, stress, trauma, thought patterns. Major depression, this, dysthemia. I've never heard of that. Seasonal, postpartum etiquette, or blah, blah, blah. Never heard of the dysthemia. I'm actually gonna quickly. Persistent depressive disorder. It's a psychiatric condition marked by symptoms that are similar to those of major depressive disorder, but which persists for at least 2 years in adults. Weird. 2 years. Strange. I don't exactly know what the difference between that is and just other types of depression. I guess basically the how long and persistent it is lasting. Uh, but yeah, so that's the quote unquote medical or clinical definition of depression. So just going by that, to an extent, just to get that definition out there. Um, but the so my own experiences with depression over the years. So I have throughout my adolescent life, I would say, I don't think I ever, well, at least if I did, I didn't really know what it was to define it, I guess. But I don't really recall ever experiencing it like that, um, when I was like below a certain age or whatever. But I'd say probably, let me think. I don't know, probably around like later, possibly middle school, but definitely around like probably like around the beginning and throughout like high school as well as after high school and stuff. That's when I started to notice or realize bouts of depression that I would have. And in those cases, I think most of these bouts of depression were mostly based off of, or sprung from, whatever you want to call it, caused by external factors, kind of like what Billy is talking about in his case, where it'd be like stress and feelings of anxiety, thinking about future things, based on current situations and stuff, like thinking a lot about certain things and like where you feel you're going or whatever, like what direction you're going and stuff. So mostly based on those, I think, but I'm sure it was also partially based on seasonal patterns or whatever, like changing of the weather and temperatures and seasons and everything. But after I got past that aspect of it, where I was feeling like, not sure what direction I was going in life and stuff like that, or just those kind of thoughts when I was around high school and like near the end of high school and stuff. I'd say after that, most of my bouts of depression and feelings of that were mostly from seasonal, like based on the seasonal changes and stuff. At least that was the pattern I would notice. Is that once it started to become like the late autumn and the early and throughout the winter months, obviously it would get cold. There'd be less daylight, less sun. I'd be going outside less because of the cold weather and stuff. Because I'm not a huge fan of the cold. I think that's my main source of bouts of depression. That would be at least the pattern. And I didn't really notice that until I started to kind of like, I would just kind of feel depressed or whatever. I would feel these symptoms of depression with the low energy and the low motivation, the feelings of like guilt or worthlessness or whatever, that kind of thing. Those kind of more self um self whatever the term would be, these feelings of just feeling like kind of crappy and stuff, or just like low energy, low motivation, low desire to do things you normally would do, that kind of thing. Less pleasure from stuff you would do and stuff, and all that. So I would notice these symptoms, but I would notice the pattern. Then I began to notice the pattern of when they would kind of come up and stuff, and that they wouldn't last like continuously. They weren't persistent. They would just kind of like come for a few weeks or a few months, and then they would just kind of like seemingly disappear or go away to an extent. But I wouldn't really like notice or like realize. It was just kind of like one of those things that would just happen over time. And then you'd sort of later put together the pattern of like, oh, so that happened around this time for whatever reason, and then it just kind of went away for some reason, which then gives you that kind of awareness of like what is going on, like, because you might, as Billy said near the end in that video, is the being able to pinpoint and have awareness of that you are feeling depressed, or that you have depression or whatever in that in that span of time or whatever. Because because it's not something that, unless you are constantly like being like thinking about it or vigilant about it, it's not something that you really notice is going on until, unless you specifically like do that. If you don't, then it's just kind of one of those things where you're just like, well, I'm just not feeling, I'm feeling low energy, I'm feeling unmotivated, I'm feeling less enjoyment from other activities and stuff, but uh you don't really put a cause on it, I guess you could say. You don't really put it like, you don't really like package it into something like, I'm feeling depressed right now, or I am depressed right now, or whatever. Like, and that's the reason that you're feeling that way, kind of shit. You don't really identify it. It's just kind of like feels like random and without reason or whatever. Um, but that's and I'd say if, there was times where certain years I didn't really notice it, but then other ones where it's definitely happened. So it's kind of somewhat sporadic. Like, maybe one year I'll feel it, the next year I won't. But then sometimes I'll have maybe multiple years in a row I'll feel it. Like I said, especially after a certain point in my life, it was more seasonally based, where it'd be like every winter I would feel some kind of like bout of depression or whatever. And these severity or the severity or whatever severity would be variable. You know, like some one year it might be worse than another year. The symptoms or whatever the intensity of the those symptoms and stuff, that those feelings and everything, and how maybe potentially how long it lasted or whatever, those would all change or be different from year to year in many cases. And for me, yeah, I'd say I felt it probably most since I've noticed, since I've like kind of identified that it is depression, or like obviously the clinical like definition of that. The symptoms are all, you would equate it to that or whatever, would point it to that. If you want to put it into a box, it would say that this is depression. So I'd say once, since I started noticing that, which was like not like a few years back, I would say I've probably experienced it almost, to some extent, almost every year since then. I would guess. Pretty much, I would say, yeah, like almost every year I've experienced some form of this or another. Once, at least once a year in some span of time. Since I was able to put it into that definition of depression, realizing that. So that's been my kind of like overall experience with it and such. Um, since I have it in in these notes the way I have it listed out, based on what Billy, how he was talking about it in his video and stuff. So I made the notes based on that. I'll talk about that specifically more as I go through this, but the next thing that Billy mentioned was talking about his son and how he didn't want his son to really play video games and get into video games, but it was his ex-wife or whatever, his ex-wife and her son's mother, that was the one that got him into the video games and shit, and kind of like pushed him towards that. And as he was saying, or I don't know if Billy really said that, but he's pretty much, I would say, probably suggesting that, or at least that's what I would imagine. That's what the mother was mostly, his son's mother was trying to do, was to use it as a babysitter of sorts, as well as maybe in a different sense trying to get him sort of addicted to it in a way, but probably mostly to use it just as most people or most women or not good parents do use it as an easy, quote unquote, easy babysitter to keep their kids distracted with something. And how do I feel about that? Being somebody that's always been kind of a video game player through most of my life. I definitely see that where that can be the negatives for sure. Um, Now, say if I was in that same kind of position, would I actively try to stop my kids from like playing, or like I would actively try to steer them away from it or like avoid it? Um, Possibly. I mean, especially at this point with the way that video games have gone in recent years, recent like the past like decade or like two like decade and a half or 2 decades, whatever. To the direction that they've been going, I would just definitely say, yeah, I probably would just tell them to try and avoid especially the modern shit. Yes, for sure. But even the stuff before that, maybe. Like the main thing is like if you're if they're just playing it and you're actually also using it as a way to bond and interact with your kid and stuff like that, and possibly like you're using it as a tool to spend time with your kid, and as a means of some form of experience or expression, then I think that is a great way to do it potentially if done that way. But using it the way that your ex-wife was or that his mother was as a babysitter, which is probably the way that most people use video games with their kids, is no, that is not. I think that is never the good way to do that. And I mean, I used it in a pretty similar way when I was a kid as a way to distance myself from the things that I didn't want to be involved in at that time. Like I played stuff like the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, even the Sega. I didn't really play the Sega Game Gear, but like any of these like Game Boy DS, these kind of portable consoles and stuff, I use them as a way to distance myself and distract myself from whatever mostly like thing I didn't want to be dragged along doing, like going out shopping, clothes shopping with my mom or whatever bullshit, going to her mother's house or being dragged along, all that bullshit that I didn't want to do. Going to family get-togethers and stuff, parties and stuff that I didn't really want to go to and stuff. So I'd use that as a way to kill time, distract myself, and distance myself from those situations that as a kid, I didn't want to be involved with. Which, is that a good or a bad thing? I can't really say. That's just what I did as a kid, and I wanted it, and my parents were pretty much okay with it. Not that they encouraged it, but I wanted like video games or something. I wanted something to play with or whatever, and they were okay with it pretty much. They didn't discourage it or necessarily encourage it or discourage it. And I would say there was probably a good extent that they was used almost as like a sort of babysitter to some extent, but my parents weren't really that like um it's not nearly as bad as I would imagine your son's mother was with just kind of like set it and forget it, just let them be, just let the video game parent them or let the video game distract them and shit while they fuck off and do whatever bullshit that they do. So I don't think it's just like anything, as you mentioned, Billy, with the hammer analogy, is like you could either build something with it or you could hit somebody with it or you can hit someone with it. I think, yeah, that's a fairly good way to put it. Uh, if used in the right way, then video games, I think they're great for spending time with your kids and everything. But if not kind of used in that way, I think they can be potentially like addictive and stuff, especially the more modern design shit, because they actively try to monetize and get them addicted with gambling and stuff like that, and all this bullshit manipulation, kind of psychological manipulation tactics and stuff to try and get them addicted and to spend money on various bullshit. But that wasn't really a thing years ago, like, like a few decades ago with the video games. That was it's a different time now. Like, I would almost say across the board now, I would definitely say not to have your kids get involved with the modern video games and shit, because it's not going to be useful or helpful in most cases, and it's just going to get them. It's going to try to push gambling and bullshit like that on them. So yeah. Um, and this was when you were started talking about your son and you trying to encourage him to do stuff like learning to sell artwork and make money on his own and stuff like that. Uh, and I just wanted to note, because it made me think. I was like, I just haven't noted down here. I'll just kind of read it verbatim. I don't think my dad ever pushed me on how I was going to make a living or make money or anything like that, which I'm not sure was a good thing or a bad thing, but I sort of just did a lot of it myself as far as I remember when it came to applying for jobs and making money here and there and such. So I could be wrong. Like, from what I recall, my mom was pretty much the only one that would ever be like asking me, like, so what do you want to do? Where do you want to work? Obviously, because they never think that you're gonna make your own business and shit like that kind of stuff. But what do you want to do? Uh, how are you gonna support yourself eventually? How are you gonna make money? Where are you gonna work? That kind of bullshit. Um, but my dad never really pressured me or pushed me with any of those kind of like questions or anything. He just kind of was in that camp of say la vie. I guess that would be I think that'd be the term, or just like say la vie, or just let bygones be bygones, whatever the term would be. Like, just let them figure it out. Let them do what they want or not. Let them do what they want or don't do what they want. That kind of thing, or don't let them do or don't let them do what they want or not, or whatever. um, like, when we got out of high school, I worked with at my dad's place for a little while, not that long, like a few months. Um, and he was obviously able to, through nepotism, not that it was like really, he doesn't have like, he's just been at that place for a long time. He's not like some high position to like, oh, you could get a job anywhere in this place. But just to get your foot in the door, I was able to work at his place for a few months. His place, I say that, the place that he works, I was able to work at that place for a few months. Same with my brother, but he worked longer than I did before I quit. Um, but I don't even recall if he was like told me like I you should work there or something or anything. I don't really recall how that happened, or like if I was like I should work at your place. I don't know. I don't really recall. He might have, but it didn't really seem like it because I can't remember if that was the case. But went through the whole process and stuff, did that. But then after that point, it was pretty much all me, whatever you want to say, self motivated or whatever. Um, going towards whatever I was trying to do at that time, or thinking I should be doing at that time. But I don't think he really pushed me towards anything in that way, and he never really pressured me to do any of that stuff either. I just kind of like sort of naturally knew that that's what I felt like I should be doing or whatever, quote unquote should be, to get towards whatever like bullshit American dream goals I was going towards at that moment. That I've been programmed to believe in and all that shit. But almost all of it seems like it was self motivated after a point. After that initial kind of point, I guess. I never felt like I needed somebody to tell me that I should be doing something or whatever. It was almost always after to an extent like me doing it on my own, choosing to do it kind of deal, not being like pressured to do it. So I don't know what to make from that. It's just kind of curious. I guess maybe the differences in people. Um, but yeah, my dad never really pressured me as far as I remember for any of that kind of stuff. And I never really questioned it. And I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing on his part or anything, because maybe it was a good thing. I don't know, but for whatever reason, I, from what I remember, I was more like self motivated, and I was just kind of going towards those things the ways that I thought was the best for me at that moment, I guess. Um, but at the same time, I also had to learn a lot of stuff that, like, if I asked them about certain things, they might give me some information that they know about certain things, like stuff like how to use the bank or how to use a bank and shit like that. But for the most part, that was just all stuff that I kind of learned how to do myself out of my own desire to do it or whatever. Yeah, out of my own desire to do it, pretty much. Like, maybe they initially helped me open a bank account, but then, like, after that, a lot of other stuff, it was mostly my own as far as I remember, but just me doing it. So, yeah, it's just kind of something I wanted to note of intrigue potentially. Um, but now back onto the topic of depression, I guess, seeing from my notes at least. Depression often felt more for me often felt for me in the effective wait a minute. Depression often felt for me in the effective symptoms of it was you was usually low energy, low motivation to do things I normally would do or quote unquote need to do, feelings of anxiety from not doing those things, which previously which previously could lead to other feelings um like sadness, worthlessness, feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, low self-esteem, etc. Um, but yeah, that is the main symptoms that I have experienced with depression. Knowing like these bouts of depression is obviously the low energy, low motivation to do things I normally would do or quote unquote need to do. I'm usually all right with staying on my routine of doing certain things like, personal hygiene and chores, whatever you want to call it, stuff like that. Like don't recall ever being like depressed enough to like not remember or not want to like eat or what, that kind of bullshit. Clean myself, that kind of stuff. Might be harder to get up and do some of that, get motivated to up and do it, but then you still will do it generally. But stuff like activities that I would normally want to be doing, I would have much, much more trouble or less motivation or derive less pleasure from doing those things than I normally would. And for some of those things that I felt like were important to strive for or whatever to do those things to achieve goals that I was kind of going towards. Especially when I was younger and I didn't really have a clear defined box to put this feeling into of depression. That's when I would feel these feelings of like anxiety of not doing these things, and then I would start feeling worthless and sad or low self-esteem or feeling anxious from not doing those things, and it would just kind of like be almost a little like loop, self-perpetuating loop to an extent. You'd feel shitty for not doing those things, so then you wouldn't do them, but you'd feel shitty for not doing them, and then that kind of stuff, so you just never do it, so you just keep feeling kind of shitty. But when I started to notice, and many other things changed as well, there's many other factors over the years, but when I started to notice and put it into a box, the of depression, I started feeling that stuff less, because then I kind of, the awareness of it, the vigilance of it, or the awareness of it, made it so I would, I would basically know to tell myself or whatever, just kind of like think in the way the mindset, as you said, Billy, was the to not feel that way, because I'm like, I know this feeling will eventually pass or whatever, this bout of depression will eventually pass, so I shouldn't feel bad or feel worse about myself or something, or or put myself down for not doing those things, because I know it's not that I can't do those things or I don't want to do those things normally. It's just or unable to do those things or whatever. It's just in that time, it's just I know it's not going to happen kind of deal, or I can't motivate myself to do it. So I'm just like, I'm not gonna try and I'm not gonna make myself feel guilty or bad for not doing that, because I know it's pointless, and it just makes you feel worse. So it's like, don't put yourself down. Don't put myself down for not doing those things that I feel like I should be doing, because it's just like, well, this eventually this feeling will pass. So just let it be. Let it be. Let like water off a duck's back or whatever. Next note: the pattern I noticed for myself most frequently centered around the changing of season. I did talk about this, but I'll just read it. Changing of season, seasonal depression would likely be the clinical term for it, though I have felt it other times when I was younger, more than likely based on external stress and expectations from the school system and the American dream programming and such. So I already talked about that. Next note: I've experienced bouts of depression fairly often over the years. Recently, I think it has gotten somewhat better or easier to deal with due to the awareness and conscious acknowledgement of it. It still happens, but being aware of that does help a lot. And I do think it does definitely help a significant amount to just be aware and vigilant of it, and when it happens and when it comes up, as I kind of talked about throughout this. I think it really does just make it better, because especially like this year, I noticed when it started to feel what it was, I was like, I felt much less bad about it, because I was much more aware of it, much more aware of the fact that what it was or whatever, that it was happening, sort of deal. Next note: depression does seem to have patterns, but it does indeed take some time to realize it is occurring. Racing, and this is where you were talking about, Billy, with these thoughts of these anxious thoughts, I guess. Uh, Anxious thoughts, I guess, and I said racing thoughts, as we have talked about, the thoughts in our, this is more of like a kind of spiritual kind of like thing. I don't know what you want to say, like spiritual or sort of like metaphysical, whatever you want to say, thing, more than I mean, it is practical, but like, more on that kind of like level. But racing thoughts, as we have talked about, the thoughts in our mind are often there to harm us. So we have to ignore them most of the time. You know, as Rudy would probably say, is that our thoughts are like of the devil, or you know, or like those are Satan's thoughts or Satan's words. That the voices in our the voice in our head telling us this stuff and making us feel these ways or whatever, making us feel anxious and stuff. Those are racing thoughts. Those are the thoughts of, or those are the words or whatever of like Satan and stuff. Those are the words of the devil. Those are the words of the not milk, whatever kind of shit. Like those, the whispers of the not milk, trying to make you feel a certain way and stuff. Intrusive thoughts that are generally there. Like the thoughts, the thoughts are your, in most cases, the thoughts are your enemy, and in most cases, you wouldn't listen to your enemy. So when these thoughts are trying to bring you down, it's definitely better to just ignore them, because most of the time the thoughts, really, your mind, your thoughts, whatever you want to say, are your enemy more than your ally, and thus they should be mostly ignored. Um, and then this, I just wanted to. This is like the last note I have for this video was, recently I have definitely been going through what I would describe as depression in a similar vein. Haven't felt like actually doing baking as much, working on my app that I've been working on as much, programming, all these activities and such. Just, you know, generally activities that I want to do or feel like I should be doing, or trying to go towards certain like goals or whatever. And just activities that I enjoy doing, like baking. I do enjoy programming to some extent. It's just hard to get started initially every day or whatever to do it. It's got a high barrier of it's got a high barrier to get over every time you want to start doing it. Like just to get, basically, like it's just to get the car started. It's pretty difficult compared to some other things, I would say, to get started on programming for whatever amount of time in a certain session or whatever, to get the ball rolling. But these are activities that I would generally view as like enjoyable and stuff, and I just haven't felt like doing them as much as I was for a while. So I know, based on that, um, I've been feeling the depression. Like just knowing that I've been feeling wanting to do stuff like baking not as much as I was a few weeks ago. I know that I'm starting to go through depression because of that. Uh, so it's like that was one of my top indications that I'm having, you know, one of my usual kind of yearly bouts of depression. And it's you know, I could see it as obviously the winter, and especially the time changing bullshit that Rudy and I have been talking about a lot recently, with the, you know, getting dark at like 5 o'clock, fucking 5:30 p.m. It's like almost as dark as like 9 p.m. shit. So that has definitely been a factor as well. So it's definitely the seasonal, usual pattern of the seasonal depression, and more factors as well. But just some of those things that I normally would do, having more difficulty starting them and doing them, motivating myself to do them, um, shows me that, yeah, I'm definitely currently in a bout of depression. And as you said, Billy, it doesn't necessarily mean feelings of sadness or whatever. It's just kind of like feelings of low energy. At the symptoms I listed, not all of them, but like many of the symptoms I listed and stuff, that kind of stuff. So definitely going through that now myself, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well. Possibly not for the same reasons, but potentially for similar patterns as well. I don't know. Just mostly been outside, you know, since I haven't been doing some of those things as I would want to be doing. I've mostly just been like consuming media, you know, like videos and social media, or whatever you want to say, like reading Reddit and shit, just browsing through stuff like that, doing stuff that is not creative, particularly, or productive, whatever you want to say. I've been playing a couple video games, very, very small amounts in terms of the number, but I've been definitely playing them more. Uh, and that seems what I've noticed is that seems to be a pattern where I get like a fascination with like one game and then I play it for like a few weeks or a few months and then I just kind of like drop it for like a long time or as long depending on the game if I ever feel like playing it more after that. But I've been playing more a video game specifically, but so that's probably a pattern with the depression is that I just feel like doing stuff like that, just like consuming media and stuff. Uh and just the general daily routine stuff. But yeah, that's been my experience recently with depression and do I know what to do about it besides being aware of it? Not really. Like that's just kind of I don't know, that's just kind of where I realized that it's just when I feel it, when I know and acknowledge it, I think that's one of the more important parts. I would imagine, I don't know if that necessarily would shorten its duration, but just being aware definitely softens the intensity of the symptoms, I would say overall, or at the very least, it makes you not exacerbate any other symptoms through that, such as the self perpetuating, like self belittling or the whatever, the self guilt and shit like that. Now, in somebody's case that isn't in my position where I have like, I have a place to live and stuff, I don't know what they can do besides just power through it to like get through the day and shit. But I guess really hopefully that's probably the most useful practical thing is just being aware and acknowledging it. That's probably the best practical thing I would imagine overall. And maybe changing certain routines or patterns to try and sort of shake it up and break out of it, break out of some patterns of it potentially to maybe kind of like shake it up, I guess, just to, as I said, sort of attempt to break out of any kind of particular pattern that might exacerbate it through your routine or whatever your daily routine and shit. Um, but yeah, that was the main stuff I wanted to talk about the depression, and I'll talk about a few other things that you talked about in that other video, the constant conversation that goes nowhere. You're talking about your mother and with her not understanding like that you just kind of have certain times where you just don't want to talk to anybody or you don't feel like having conversations or whatever. But I would say that I have my notes here. My mom is also very very similar with the not understanding boundaries and not caring. Like I have told my mom many times that her being around me makes me anxious and I don't like cooking slash baking when she's around and that I just like to be left to myself when doing that stuff. Uh, I just like to be left alone when I'm doing that stuff. It's my sort of like feeling of zen and stuff. I don't want to be bothered by somebody else in most cases when doing that. But even with that, she will still actively bother me for her own venting and useless conversation noise crap. Like she'll still sometimes like I'm not saying she'll always do that. Like she'll once she kind of notices that, or once I kind of like straight up just tell her, she'll usually like go away for a while, but then she'll usually almost like come back. Like she doesn't go out of her way to try to avoid bothering me or whatever. Like she'll actively kind of go and get in my way to some extent every once in a while. She just kind of like come downstairs to the kitchen and shit while I'm doing the stuff, and then like whatever, make a comment or something, or like get in my way in some way, shape or form. So, or she'll just sit in the kitchen and whatever if she was say coming home from work, and then talk to me about bullshit, vent about her stupid day and shit. And that it's like whatever. It's mostly getting in my way and making stuff dirty. Then I have to clean up. That's more the thing that bothers me. But so she's very similar in the same way, and I guarantee it is almost maybe not exactly the same, but probably very close to the same reasons that I think they kind of do this. Um, which I sort of have in this next note here is I think the meaningless filler from some of these people is both vampiric slash parasitic, as well as to try and silence silence or fill the void of silence in their own minds that they despise so much. Only potentially having their own thoughts terrifies them, so they fill it with pointless noise. So this is like both, I think, them trying to calm their own anxiety by quieting the voice in their head, by not so much quieting it by looking within or by quieting it by actually having quiet and just kind of ignoring it. They try to what's the word? They try to they try to block it out, or not so much blow. I forget what the word would be. They try to like drown it. That's it. They try to drown it out with noise. So that noise, they have just pointless conversations with like other people and shit like that. That's like them filling that void, and filling that and keeping those thoughts from them having to like deal with it themselves. So they just kind of try to drown it out with like other pointless noise, like with these pointless conversations and bullshit like that, pointless filler crap. But also the thing of like, the idea of like energy vampire and parasites and stuff, and them trying to basically suck energy from other people through stuff like venting and talking about bullshit and things like that. Um, what was the other part? The Oh yeah, but Billy mentioned that. I mean, I'm sorry, not Billy. Rudy mentioned that with these people that are like extrovert vampires or extrovert parasites kind of shit, where they're extroverted, so they're extroverted. They get energy. They recharge their batteries by talking and conversing and interacting with other people and stuff. Whereas introverts, it's kind of the opposite. Their energy, their battery gets drained through that stuff, and they need to recharge that battery by being alone and having solitude and stuff. Being away from other people is what helps introverts charge their battery pretty much. Whereas extroverts is the opposite. They get drained from being alone, but they get energy from being around other people. And as you can kind of see, the comparison is that they basically are being vampires to other people. You'd imagine that two extroverts would be able to charge each other, and then it would be like a loop, an infinite loop of energy. But when it's an extrovert doing it with an introvert, then it's the introvert is being parasited and vampirically sucked of their energy by the extrovert kind of thing. So it's probably a big, maybe not a big factor, but it's a good factor there. And most women, the vast majority of women, and probably people in general, but definitely mostly women in this case, are extroverts, even if they try to say that they're introverts. Like there are introvert women, but the vast majority of them are extrovert women. So they love to be energy parasites in that way, and they love to talk about bullshit with people and just make just BS noise and stuff essentially. So that was just my take on that particular sections of that video. But the main thing was the whole depression thing. Did I have anything else to say besides that? Since it has almost gone on for 50 minutes, I don't think so. I don't think I did the best way of wording all this and doing this concisely, but hey, I haven't done a video like this in a while, so fuck it. But hopefully that kind of response found interesting or relatable or maybe helped in some way, but I guess I'll just end it with that. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care, and I'll see you in the next one.